Monday morning. Sunlight slipped through the small kitchen window of my Spokane apartment. I poured my coffee same as every other day. But today, there was an envelope on the table from First National Bank. I tore it open. My chest tightened. A $200 000 loan in my name. Date issued 2 weeks ago. Signature flawless. Except I had never signed it. I flipped to the next page. And the name on the transfer order hit me like a punch to the gut. Ethan Miller. My only son. The boy I raised alone after losing my wife. The person I added to my account for emergencies, only trusting he would protect me if I ever needed him, but he hadn't used that trust to save me. He'd used it to destroy me. For his wife Vanessa, a woman addicted to designer handbags, luxury cars, and $200 a plate dinners, I sat there in silence. First came shock, then bitterness, and then something colder. Because if they thought my age and my love for family would make me weak, they were about to learn the most expensive lesson of their lives. And believe me, this lesson would haunt them forever. If you've ever been betrayed by the person you trusted, most stay with me until the very end. And if this story hits you the way it hit me, make sure to subscribe, because you'll want to hear exactly how I turned their betrayal into the perfect revenge. My name is Robert Miller, 68 years old, widower for more than a decade. I've spent my entire life here in Spokane, Washington. 40 years in banking loans, signatures, fraud detection. I've seen it all. Back then, people called me the guy who could smell a bad deal before it hit the desk. It was my job to protect the bank from people who wanted something for nothing. Funny. In the end, the person I needed to protect myself from wasn't a stranger. It was my own flesh and blood. After my wife passed, my son Ethan was all I had. I raised him alone, paid for his college, bailed him out when he made the stupid choices with credit cards and get-rich-quick schemes. I told myself it was what fathers do, you give until there's nothing left to give. 5 years ago, I made what I thought was a harmless decision. I added Ethan to my bank account, for emergencies only. I pictured a car accident, a hospital bill, maybe helping him cover rent if he lost his job. Never not once did I imagine he would turn that trust into a weapon. I live in a modest apartment. My pension is just enough to cover bills, groceries, and the occasional cup of good coffee. I don't drive a luxury car, I don't take vacations. But I do have one thing that matters more than money, my name. For 40 years, that name stood for integrity, until the day I opened that envelope and realized my own son had forged it. Ethan is 35 now. When he was little, I saw him as my second chance at life after losing my wife. He was bright, charming, and had a smile that could talk his way out of trouble. And trouble, he found plenty of it. In high school, it was late report cards and friends I didn't trust. In college, it became maxed-out credit cards and business ideas that went nowhere. Each time I stepped in, paid off the debt, smoothed things over, told myself it was just a phase, that one day he'd learn the value of standing on his own. But Ethan never learned to fix his mistakes. He learned that I would. He always had expensive tastes, nice clothes, fancy dinners, cars he couldn't afford. When he married Vanessa, that appetite for luxury doubled overnight. And instead of finding a way to build the life they wanted, they found ways to take shortcuts. I'd seen him lie to friends to get what he wanted. I'd seen him manipulate family members for loans he never intended to repay. But I still believed foolishly that he'd never turn that same cruelty on me. Ethan was the kind of man who could look you in the eye, smile, and thank you, while sliding your wallet out of your pocket. And when I put his name on my account for emergencies, I might as well have handed him the keys to the vault. Vanessa Miller, 32 years old, If Ethan was gasoline, she was the match. The first time I met her, she showed up to Sunday dinner in a dress that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Perfect hair, diamond earrings, a phone that never left her hand. She smiled at me the way a salesperson does when they've already decided you can't afford what they're selling. From the start, I could tell Vanessa didn't marry my son for love. She married the life she thought he could give her. Problem was, Ethan couldn't give her that life. Not honestly, anyway. She lived for appearances. Instagram posts of date nights at restaurants I knew Ethan couldn't afford. Vacations to places I'd only seen in magazines. Shopping bags from luxury brands stacked like trophies in their walk-in closet. Every conversation with her was a subtle reminder that my modest apartment, my old Honda, my simple way of living were beneath her. She never said it outright. She didn't have to. I used to think Ethan's reckless spending was his own weakness. But after Vanessa came along, it became something else entirely, an obsession to keep up with the image she demanded. Vanessa was polite enough to my face, but I could feel it, that cold calculation just beneath the surface. And I learned a long time ago in banking, when someone's smiling while they size you up, they're not thinking about who you are. They're thinking about what they can take. I just didn't know yet how far she was willing to go. It started with an envelope. White, crisp, official. First National Bank, the same place I'd worked for 4 decades. I was sipping my morning coffee when I tore it open. The number hit me first, $200,000, a personal loan, in my name. Approved just 2 weeks ago. I read it twice, thinking maybe my eyes were playing tricks. But there it was, my name, my address, and a perfect copy of my signature at the bottom. Only one problem: I had never signed it. I called the bank immediately. Jennifer from customer service answered polite as ever. "Yes, Mr. Miller, I see the loan here. Applied for online, verified with your Social Security number, digital signature on file. Funds deposited into your checking account on March 2nd. "That's impossible," I told her. "My account balance hasn't changed in months." She paused typing. "Oh, I see." The funds were transferred out the same day to a joint account holder. Ethan Miller. My stomach turned cold. 5 years ago, after my wife died, I'd added Ethan to my account for emergencies. He was supposed to use it if I got sick, if I couldn't take care of myself. Jennifer's voice was careful, almost hesitant. "Mr. Miller, do you need to report fraudulent activity?" Fraudulent activity. 2 words that felt different when the suspect wasn't a stranger but your own son. I hung up without answering. Not because I didn't know what to say, but because I knew exactly what needed to happen next. The drive to Ethan's house took 27 minutes, but it felt like hours. Every red light gave me more time to rehearse what I'd say, what I'd do when I saw him. His modest starter home had transformed into a mansion in the upscale Ridgeview neighborhood. Circular driveway, perfect lawn. 2 cars in the front, a brand new BMW and a Mercedes SUV. Combined, they were worth more than my entire retirement savings. I parked on the street. The loan statement was folded in my jacket pocket, edges worn from how many times I'd gripped it on the drive over. Ethan opened the door. "Dad, you should have called first. We need to talk." I stepped past him into the foyer. Hardwood floors gleamed under my shoes. Floor-to-ceiling windows opened to a view of the valley. The air smelled faintly of some designer candle. "What's going on?" he asked, his voice tight. I handed him the statement. "Care to explain this?" His face went pale. I don't know what this is." $200,000, Ethan. Loan in my name. Bank says the money went straight into your account." He stammered. There must be some mistake. I cut him off. Don't insult me. I worked 40 years in banking. I know exactly what forgery looks like, and this is yours." He looked toward the stairs as if searching for backup, and that's when she appeared. Vanessa. Designer workout gear, hair perfect diamond catching the light. She walked down slowly, one hand on the banister, eyes locked on me. "Oh, Robert," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're making such a fuss over nothing." Vanessa reached the bottom of the stairs like she was making a grand entrance to a stage she owned. She slipped her arm through Ethan's, leaning into him like I was some outsider interrupting their perfect life. "Robert," she said, "you're going to die soon anyway. Why do you need that money?" The words hit harder than the loan statement, harder than the forged signature, harder than knowing my own son had stolen from me. Ethan didn't defend me. He didn't flinch. He just stood there letting her words hang in the air like they were nothing more than a casual observation. I'd faced liars before in my career. Con artists, forgers. But this was different. This was family using my mortality as a justification for theft. Something inside me went quiet. The hot anger cooled into something sharper, heavier. It was the same feeling I'd get back at the bank when I'd catch someone mid-scam. That moment you stop reacting and start planning. I folded the loan statement and slid it back into my pocket. Vanessa's smirk told me she thought she'd won. Ethan's silence told me he'd chosen his side. They believed my age made me powerless. That love for my son would keep me from acting. That I'd swallow the insult, pay the debt, and fade quietly into the background. But they were wrong. Dead wrong. Because in that moment, I knew this wasn't just about getting my money back. It was about teaching them both a lesson they'd remember for the rest of their lives, however long that turned out to be. 3 days later, the knock on my door wasn't a neighbor or the mailman. It was a courier, crisp suit leather briefcase delivering 3 thick envelopes from First National Bank. I poured a cup of coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened them one by one. Default notice, collection procedures, foreclosure warning. I'd sent out letters like these myself back when I was the one sitting behind the desk. Cold, precise, and final. Now, I was on the receiving end. The math was brutal. Monthly payments over $10,000 on a pension of $1,200. I wouldn't just lose my apartment, I'd lose the only stability I had left. I walked to the bank that morning, 6 blocks through the same streets I'd taken for 40 years. Margaret Wells, the branch manager, greeted me with a face that tried to balance professionalism with pity. "Robert, I'm sorry we're meeting like this." She laid it out plain. The loan was valid. My name was on it, and as co-signer I was fully liable no matter who had actually taken the money. Fraud allegations they'd investigated. The signature matched their records perfectly. Of course it did. Ethan had years of practice signing my name on smaller documents. This was just his masterpiece. I left the bank without anger, without panic, because by the time I reached my front door, my mind was already moving in a different direction. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight in the way they expected. I was going to dismantle them piece by piece using the same precision the bank had just used on me. I spent the weekend the same way I used to prepare for high-stakes fraud investigations at the bank, quiet, methodical, deliberate. A yellow legal pad sat in the center of my kitchen table, pages already filling with names, dates, and connections. Neighbors, old colleagues, people who might know something about Ethan and Vanessa's financial habits. I pulled my old leather address book from a drawer, the one I hadn't touched since retirement. 40 years of professional contacts from loan officers to private investigators. Monday morning, I made my first call. Elizabeth Dunn, an old co-worker who now handled credit approvals at Commerce Bank. She didn't hesitate. "Robert, your son's been busy. We've rejected 3 applications from him this year alone, and one of them, the signature, didn't look quite right. By noon, I was in the office of Tom Rodriguez, a fraud specialist at Inland Empire Credit Union. Tom had that grim look I'd seen before, the one that says you're not going to like what I'm about to tell you. Your son's applied at 4 different banks in the last 18 months. He's been escalating small loans at first, then bigger ones. And now this. Tom slid a stack of credit reports toward me. Nearly $300,000 in attempted loans, about $60,000 actually funded, and my name attached to far too many of them. This wasn't a one-time betrayal, it was a pattern, a system, and I'd just uncovered the blueprint. When I left Tom's office, I wasn't thinking like a father anymore. I was thinking like a prosecutor, and I knew exactly where to start tightening the noose. Thursday morning, I sat 3 blocks from Ethan's house in my old Honda, a thermos of coffee beside me and my digital camera on the passenger seat. The plan was simple. Follow Vanessa. See where she went. See what she did when she thought no one was watching. At 11:47, she emerged. Mercedes keys in hand. Designer sunglasses. The kind of outfit that said money isn't a problem. Money, of course, that used to be mine. Her first stop, Nordstrom. Through my zoom lens, I watched her in the jewelry department smiling as the clerk brought out watches from the back, the expensive ones they only show to VIP customers. She picked a Tag Heuer, price tag $2,100. Not for Ethan. He's worn the same cheap digital watch for years. Next, she drove downtown to an upscale Italian restaurant. I took a seat across the street with a clear view through the big glass windows. A man was already at the table, a mid-30s sharp suit, the kind of smile that knows its worth. When she arrived, he stood and kissed her. Not a polite peck, the kind of kiss that tells you they've done this before. At one point, she fastened the new watch onto his wrist, laughing as he admired it. I clicked the shutter. 1 shot, 2, 3. After lunch, they headed to the Davenport Hotel bar, ordering champagne like it was tap water. I got the final shot. I needed Vanessa's wedding ring glinting as she cupped his face. By the time I drove home, my camera held more than photos. It held ammunition. And soon, Ethan would find out exactly how his wife had been spending the money he'd stolen from me. That night, I spread the photographs across my kitchen table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. Vanessa at Nordstrom. Vanessa at lunch. Vanessa with her hand on the stranger's face. The stranger. I couldn't stop looking at him. Something about his posture, the way he signed the restaurant bill, the easy confidence. I dug through the credit reports Tom had given me earlier in the week. There it was. Marcus Webb. Listed as a co-applicant on 2 of the fraudulent loan applications, both rejected by other banks. I pulled the documents closer. The signature on Marcus's forms looked eerily like Vanessa's handwriting. Not an exact match, but close enough to make my banker's instincts tingle. I picked up the phone and called Elizabeth Dunn again. Elizabeth, run the name Marcus Webb through your system. Tell me if he's ever applied for credit in Spokane. 10 minutes later, she called back. Robert, you're not going to like this. Webb's been flagged for suspicious applications at 3 different institutions. 2 of them list a Vanessa Miller as a personal reference. So there it was. Not just infidelity, not just theft, but partnership. Vanessa wasn't a bystander in Ethan's scheme. She was an architect working alongside her lover to siphon money through my son, using him as both shield and pawn. The anger I'd felt when I first saw that loan statement now seemed quaint. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was about dismantling a criminal operation that had my own blood at the center. And for that, I was going to need more than photographs. I was going to need an army. The next morning, I opened my old address book and started making calls. Not to lawyers, not to the police, not yet. I called Linda Martinez, first Ethan's old neighbor. Her voice shook when I told her why I was calling. "Robert, he told me you were sick. Said if I co-signed a car loan for him, the money would go toward your medical bills." "How much, Linda?" $18,000. "The car's been repossessed. Now they say I owe the balance." I told her she wasn't alone. By noon, I had 4 more names. An elderly church member who'd mortgaged her home. A retired co-worker who'd lent Ethan $5,000 for a business opportunity. A widower who'd guaranteed a lease in Ethan's name. Each story was the same emotional manipulation, the same forged paperwork, the same calculated abuse of trust. That evening, we met in a small community center room, 7 people in total. Some angry, some heartbroken, all ready for answers. I stood at the whiteboard and began mapping the pattern. Dates, amounts, victims. The escalation from small loans to massive fraud. "This isn't random," I told them. "This is an organized operation, and we're going to take it apart." When they saw the photographs of Vanessa and Marcus, the mood shifted. They realized this wasn't just financial. It was personal. It was betrayal woven into every dollar stolen. By the end of the night, we had a plan, 1 lawyer, 1 coordinated case, 1 united front. They thought they'd picked us off one by one. Instead, we were about to come for them together. It was Ethan who called me first. No small talk, no dad, just pure sharp panic. "I know what you're doing. Gathering people, filling their heads with lies. It stops now." I told him to meet me at Romano's in an hour. Public, well lit, a place where tempers had to be contained. He was already there when I arrived, sitting at the corner table, the kind of seat that lets you see every entrance. A control move. Learned from Vanessa, no doubt. "You think you're clever," he started, voice low but tight. "You're messing with things you don't understand. Bank records aren't things. Credit reports aren't stories," I said, setting my briefcase beside me. That's when Vanessa arrived. She slid into the seat next to him, hand on his arm. Voice smooth as silk. "Robert, we're family. We can work this out." Her eyes flickered just for a second when I told them there were complications they didn't know about. They were fishing for how much I'd uncovered. I let them wonder. Then I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen. The photo appeared, Vanessa champagne glass in hand. Marcus's watch on her wrist, his arm around her waist. Ethan's face drained of color. Vanessa didn't flinch. "Fake," she said flatly. "Anyone can doctor a photo." I swiped to the next, her hands on Marcus's face wedding ring in plain view. The watch, the suit, the intimacy. Ethan's breathing quickened. "Vanessa," she leaned closer to him, voice dripping with condescension. "Honey, he's desperate. He'll say anything." And in that moment, I saw it. He wasn't rejecting the truth because he didn't believe it. He was rejecting it because accepting it meant admitting his entire life was a lie. The following Monday, the pieces slid into place with mechanical precision. By 9:00 a.m., Patricia Stone, our fraud attorney, had filed criminal charges: identity theft, bank fraud, elder financial abuse. By noon, the civil suit was in motion, seeking asset forfeiture, wage garnishment, and full restitution. But I didn't stop there. At 2:00 p.m., I walked into Vanessa's office building downtown carrying a sealed envelope marked Confidential HR Director. Inside, photographs of her with Marcus, purchase receipts, and a concise, factual summary of how she'd funded the affair with stolen money. Her job required a clean record. That record was now in flames. From there, I visited the post office. 27 stamped envelopes, each addressed to someone in Vanessa's inner circle, family, friends, college acquaintances. Inside each, the same photographs, the same truth. Reputation takes years to build and minutes to destroy. By Tuesday morning, the phone calls began. Her parents, her friends, even her church group. One by one, doors were closing, friendships dissolving. Meanwhile, Ethan's bank accounts were frozen. The BMW and Mercedes both repossessed. The house under court, order for liquidation. At 10:30, Ethan called me, his voice unsteady. "Dad." Emily left me. He caught himself. Vanessa. She left, took her things, said she won't go down with me. I let the silence stretch. This isn't about going down, Ethan. This is about facing what you've done. By Friday, the Spokane Press was running our story under the headline, "Retired Banker Leads Victims Coalition in Major Fraud Case." They thought they could bleed us quietly one by one. Instead, I'd made sure the whole city was watching when the trap snapped shut. The Spokane County Courthouse smelled faintly of old paper and polished wood. I'd walked those halls for decades as a banker. Now, I walked them as the man who had dismantled his own son's criminal empire. In the gallery, every victim from our coalition sat in silent unity. Linda Martinez, Mrs. Patterson, Tom. People Ethan thought would never speak to each other, now bound by shared betrayal. When the judge entered, Ethan stood at the defendant's table. Gone was the expensive suit. Gone was the swagger. He wore a wrinkled shirt, eyes hollow from weeks of frozen accounts, public humiliation, and Vanessa's abandonment. "Mr. Anderson, Judge Harrison said you have been charged with multiple counts of identity theft, bank fraud, and financial exploitation of the elderly. How do you plead?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Guilty, Your Honor." Patricia Stone rose. "Your Honor, this case would not exist without the meticulous documentation and organization of Mr. Robert Miller. His evidence exposed a 3-year pattern of calculated fraud affecting 7 victims and totaling over $300,000. The judge reviewed the evidence bank records, signature analyses, photographs. Then came the sentence, 3 years probation, 500 hours of community service, full restitution, all assets liquidated, wages garnished until repayment is complete. Ethan's shoulders sagged under the weight of reality. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a life dismantled piece by piece, just as he had dismantled ours. I didn't smile. Revenge doesn't always look like gloating. Sometimes it looks like watching the system work exactly as it's supposed to. When court adjourned, I walked out without looking back. He'd chosen his path. I'd simply made sure it ended here. That evening, I sat alone in my modest apartment, the same one Ethan once mocked for being too small for a man who worked 40 years. Now it felt different. Not bigger, not richer, just mine. The headlines still scrolled across the local news, "Retired Banker Leads Coalition to Justice." Neighbors stopped me on the street to shake my hand. Other victims, people I'd never met, sent letters asking how to organize their own fight. Ethan's house would be sold within 60 days. His cars were already gone. Every paycheck he earned for years would be sliced apart by court-ordered garnishments. Vanessa had vanished from Spokane's social scene entirely. Rumor was Marcus could fund her tastes but not restore her reputation. I didn't celebrate. This wasn't about winning in the way most people imagine. It was about restoring balance, about showing that betrayal, even by blood, carries consequences. On my kitchen table sat a neatly organized binder labeled Fraud Case Miller versus Anderson. Inside was every page of evidence, every signature analysis, every photograph. not as a trophy, but as a reminder. I thought about the first day, the shock of that forged loan, the trembling in my hands. I wasn't trembling now. I poured myself a cup of coffee and looked out over Spokane's quiet streets. Justice had been served, and not just by the courts. We'd served it ourselves methodically, relentlessly, without losing our dignity. I'd entered this fight as a victim. I was leaving it as something else entirely, a man who'd proven that revenge, when done right, doesn't just punish. It protects, and that was enough.